I fell most deeply in love with cannabis after I joined the industry, honestly. And I said I come from pharmaceutical sales background. Never once in that industry did I ever hear from a patient that it was really that life changing for them, like getting on my prescription.
Welcome to Flourishing in Cannabis, where I bridge the gap between the plant and technology while focusing on the human aspects of the industry. I'm your host, Vien Trinh, Director of Marketing for Flourish Software, and I'm excited to have our guest today, Megan Jewett, living in central New York, but has worked within the space for quite some time. Lovely to have you, Megan.
Thank you very much, Vien. Pleasure to be here.
I'm glad we talked about this, I think, at the CFA in February or March in Buffalo, where it was extremely cold. Was it Buffalo or Albany?
Albany. That was Albany.
It was Albany. I get
One of those upstate states in New York.
where it's freezing cold and there's not a lot to do except for look at snow. But it was a great time getting to know you, getting to meet you. But why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, no, absolutely excited. It has been a moment for us to actually come together and do this. So stoked to be here today. Yeah, so I've been in recreational cannabis since 2017, which, my goodness, that math, what does that make that now? I think
8 years.
8 years. Yeah, 8 years. Wow. Previously to cannabis, I've always been a consumer, but I was a total closet consumer, if you will, right? Like I hate to say this because it's almost like a naughty word in cannabis, but I went to grad school. I know. And that was something.
God forbid we have degrees.
I know. I shouldn't. Don't judge me or hate me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I got my MBA, so I get you.
Okay. Maybe you were too, but I was very closeted about my cannabis use, but I used it. It has always helped me with sort of anxiety and depression, really. And when I was younger, I was prescribed prescription meds for that stuff. And I hated all the side effects, right? I just couldn't function. And I found that cannabis gave me a lot of the same positive effects without those negative side effects, right? So it's always just been my personal choice. But again, very closeted. And after I finished school, I got into the pharmaceutical industry, and I was doing, because I was like, okay, I like to sell molecules. How can I do that legally? That was the only real option at that time. But as we all know, the cannabis industry was starting, right? I watched Colorado go rec, which I'm from Colorado, and it was like the year that I moved. I was so pissed about that. So I watched that happen, and then I was living in Nevada at the time, and they were going rec in 2017. And I just thought, my goodness, I've got to get into that industry. So I gave up quite a bit. I gave up my company car and credit card and all sorts of stuff. And I saw some company online. I didn't know too much about the industry at the time. Applied, got the job. So went into cannabis sales. And it was randomly for a brand called Select. And Select was, I didn't know it at the time, but it was like jumping on a rocket ship right before it flies off to the moon, because it was before Select had been acquired by Curaleaf. And really, when I started with the company, they were in 3 states. When I left, I think they were in 12 or 15. The amount of capital that was acquired during the time I was there, the amount of times that we changed offices 3 times in 9 months because we just kept exploding. Insane growth, like nothing I've ever seen before in life. And that was my intro to the cannabis space, which was pretty awesome. And then from there, I've continued to just develop and do really honestly what I love in life. I'm so lucky to have this opportunity because I get to, first of all, I'm still a consumer, right? So I get to consume and then just develop brands and market and sell them to consumers like me in the cannabis space. And yep, I've been doing that ever since. I worked with a vape brand in Nevada I invented called Resonate, which became a top seller. And then I fell in love with the burgeoning New York scene. This was in 2022. And at the time, I was launching a Canadian chef's cookbook in the United States. And I also had a buddy that was launching a vape brand in New York. And New York in 2022, they just, I think, announced that they were going to go recreational. New York just took that as like literal of that day, and everyone just started selling cannabis, and there were just
Every
brand like
street corner, every bodega,
every
convenience store.
bodega, yeah, and
Yeah.
everyone's just smoking on every corner, and so I came into that, we did this launch party, so I had the launch party for the cookbook and the vape brand, right, at the same
Mhm.
location at High Garden in New York, beautiful location. There was consumption allowed there, and I really just fell in love with the scene, right? People are consuming, like we said, on every corner of the city. Plus, you can get like dollar pizza slices at the same time. I was like, this is like a cannabis consumer's dream, right? Who cares about the public urination? No. And so I started at the time I was working for a national company, and they made the decision to launch the brand in New York. So I left Nevada, came out here, and have been here for the past 3 years. Although in the most random, so I launched a couple of brands in New York, Florette being one of them, and then randomly got pulled back to the Nevada market. So now I'm living in New York, but focused on Nevada for work with a company called True Harmony. And I get to run their sales and marketing departments. They are a cultivation startup. We're developing brands specifically for the Nevada market and great group of people to work with. So I'm having a blast. And that's my cannabis, long winded cannabis story.
It is amazing. The reason why we rebranded this podcast as Flourishing Cannabis is because I wanted to focus on the human aspect, as I said, the relationships that are in the market and everybody's real story of how they got there. My story is a little bit different, just to share. It won't be as long winded and it's not going to be as fun to hear about. But my background is very dry. I was in finance. I got my MBA in finance after I got back from Iraq. I was in the military for a bit as a veteran. And truthfully, I didn't even start consuming until 2017. So it took me about 7 years after I got out of the military to take away that stigma, that taboo of cannabis. And my first time was actually out here visiting my cousin here in San Diego, where I live now, hitting up a dispensary, grabbing a Curvana pen. I just fell in love with the packaging. It's like, oh, this is easy to smoke. And it realized that it did that effect of being able to calm me down, like the anxiety, as you said, to relax. So became a recreational consumer then. 2019, 2020 was when they announced in Illinois that they were going to legalize cannabis through the congression or through the government. And there was this green rush, started attending events and started realizing that this space is somewhere that I'd love to be able to branch into. So I left my job in 20 at the end of 2020 during COVID. They had severances. So took that severance, took some time off and found work within the cannabis tech space and built out my career from there. But in the end, still love the space, traded in the office, a little bit of professionalism and that corporate aspect to have fun. Like, I mean, there's nothing like a cannabis networking event. There's nothing like that in the industry, right? It's just a different vibe. People are just different walks of life and people are talking about something that they're passionate about, which is also work. So amazing that you've been able to move from Colorado, Nevada, New York, back to Nevada and still be in the space and still be flourishing, no pun intended. But I love to hear a little bit about what you've been doing at True Harmony and the differences between that burgeoning New York market and everything that's going on in New York and what you're experiencing in Nevada right now, if you can, Megan.
Yeah, absolutely. At True Harmony, we are a 250,000 square foot mixed light facility, completely state of the art, first of its kind in North America, right? They started as a hemp facility, and unfortunately, with after Farm Bill, the hemp market bottomed out a bit. And I think this company really saw a value add in moving into the recreational cannabis side, of course, and through no small feat, they were able to get a cultivation license in Nevada. And I guess that's one difference between Nevada and New York in a major way is the fact that when I started in the New York market, there were like 10 dispensaries, right? In the whole license in the whole state. And for the 3 years that I was in it, it grew to, I think, 450 or so, or 500 by the time I left. I mean, an insane amount of growth compared to Nevada that has launched a limited amount of adult use licenses. And generally, once there is one in each county, you can't get another one, I believe is the legality there. Very different environment to work in. And True Harmony, we're just really getting started. We had our, and this is my niche or area of expertise in the cannabis space, is really these startups, right? And I thrive in that startup environment. It's weird because I also, just in my personal private life, I'm an equestrian, right? So I ride horses, and for most of my adult life, I've been taking these off-track thoroughbreds and restarting them, right? So again, it's like I just keep starting things. So very much we're just this cultivation startup that obviously has some bandwidth to really be a player in the state. And I love our focus on sustainability. So we're using peat moss to grow, for instance, instead of rockwool or cocoa or other media. Rockwool ends up in landfills for decades, centuries even, and cocoa requires a lot of water to grow those coconuts. We're trying to find viable alternatives that are also good for the planet. And then the fact that we're using the sun on top of our LED lights, and people have called us a sun-grown facility, and it's like we're very mixed light. I just learned the other day, I think we have 4,700 LED lights in the facility, so that's definitely not sun-grown. But the thing that I think consumers would really appreciate about, or industry folks for that matter, about the use of sunlight is it does bring out a better terpene expression of the plant, right? So I'm all for those mixed light environment grows, right? Because they're bringing the best of both worlds, right? Indoor versus outdoor, and giving it in this mixed environment. And that's what we're doing at True Harmony. Let's see. And then how is that different? I think overall, New York, it's a massive market, right? It's projected to be what? I mean, 8 billion by 2027. It's projected to be a massive market. And so anyone with the sales orientation, obviously that's attractive, right? And so much bigger than Nevada, and then also very, very fast paced and just at its starting stage. I generally see in these markets, there's about a 10-year green rush, quote unquote, right? So brands are coming in, the market's becoming more and more saturated. It starts to become a race to the bottom, price compression happens. And then, like we saw in California, right? It just bottomed out into nothing, and pounds are going for $100. And Nevada's definitely in that downward spiral right now in a huge way. Also, this is very national. Tourism is down quite a bit in Nevada, and that's what it relies heavily on. And the cannabis market and the tourism market are very similar, and they're rely on each other. They're definitely in a symbiotic relationship in Nevada. And yeah, that's bottoming out right now. So price compression is real. Sales are down, unit sales are down. And then in New York, it's the exact opposite, right? Like it's just increase year over year astronomically, like 1,000% increase year over year, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's still going to be like that. And you bring up a great point about Nevada. I used to work for a company that was looking to create a payment processor and a credit card that allowed for cannabis purchases. For those of you that know the industry or that are familiar with it, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, Amex, they're anti-cannabis. And that is an internal policy just because they don't want to touch cannabis until it's federally legal or possibly if it's rescheduled, which is something that we'll talk about here in a bit. We had originally looked to California to be the starting point for the go-to-market plan, but we weren't able to get to secure a bank in that location. So in that state, excuse me. And then we tried to go to Nevada. And in my mind, Nevada was going to be a very tough sell because of the fact that no one is just going to apply for the credit card to go to a Planet 13 to get cannabis. It really is very tourist driven in general. So I understand that, and tourism is down there. But obviously, as you said, New York, even though it is the Mecca, there's so much opportunity there. Tourism is going to fuel New York in the future. And we talked about it on the other podcast with some other guests, but just New York City in general, people coming from all over the country, all over the world to go to New York City. And also, like I said, Central, Albany, like Buffalo, in the fall, in the spring, you got the foliage. And it's a really beautiful place to just kind of be around and take in the scenery while smoking a joint or whatever you want to prefer. But going back to New York, you work with Florette. They're a Flourish customer. They're doing great. I see their advertising. I love their packaging, smoke their products. Great stuff. When you were in New York, I know that you had worked with technology and when you were doing sales, when you're doing marketing. What type of technology did you use that you felt was the most beneficial for you in your role when you were at Florette?
I think first, let me say in the 8 years that I've been in this industry, just the technology has improved so much overall, and just the fact that we have some technology and data to deal with, that was honestly, I'm a science nerd, I'm a data nerd, and so not having any real data or numbers to go by, it's like you just go by your gut feeling if your brand's doing well and whatever the bud tenders tell you, which is valuable too. I call it there's qualitative data, right, and quantitative data, and you need both to see the
Street
picture.
data, right? Yeah.
Yeah, street data is super valuable in this space, but I also like to just see numbers on paper. Call me weird, I don't know.
No, not at all. I come from a data analytics background. I used to build Tableau
Okay.
dashboards and look at data and do SAS and SQL, but that life is beyond me now. Like I like looking at the data, but I don't like playing with it anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you've gotta obviously, you have that background if you work for
Mhm.
Flourish. Yeah, no, I just definitely cannabis is truly becoming more of a CPG, a consumer packaged goods space, right? And having these ERPs basically in place and the technology to manage our inventory and also have the communication between departments of sales versus operations versus accounting. Oftentimes in the cannabis space at first, I remember how disjointed all of that was, and something as simple as getting an invoice out to a customer was a massive challenge that could take hours, and so all this technology has really benefited the space in a huge way, and that's the sort of technology that I find very valuable from a sales perspective. And then I think from a marketing perspective, I love all of the digital sponsorship branding opportunities there are out
Mhm.
there that have the oftentimes you're marketing to a very niche consumer market, or even you're just marketing to the buying community in the cannabis space. And so to have the ability to hyper target onto those folks versus just the ability to put out a billboard or something where half the people driving by are underage, I think it's super valuable. And that's all thanks to technology.
It is. It is. We're going to take a quick pause here. If you like what you hear, Flourishing Cannabis, press the subscribe button. But you know what? I want to talk a little bit about what you just said about digital, about advertising and marketing. Obviously, when it comes to cannabis, we have to jump through hoops. Everything is SEO, everything is very organic, and we have to do a lot of grassroots marketing. There are some benefits, hopefully, that will come with rescheduling to possibly Schedule 3 because it will be considered a drug that has medicinal value. Hopefully, opening that up for, we saw that Google is now experimenting with cannabis marketing, online ads within Canada. So this is something that I love to see is that with a reschedulization, there will be possibly opportunities, 280E being eliminated, hopefully maybe Safer Banking Act, the use of possible credit cards in the future, because that's what people really want to be able to use and take away just cash is king. But you and I have had a conversation that there might be some benefit, but there is a possibility that the disadvantages might outweigh that. And I'd love to hear your opinion on that, Megan.
Yeah, no, I honestly all of these reasons you just said, right? It makes it sound like this really great opportunity, but I believe it's a bit of a Trojan horse at the end of the day. I'm coming from previous experience with the pharmaceutical industry, right? And so when they're talking about rescheduling it to a Schedule 3, Schedule 3 drugs are not the drugs that you can just buy at CVS or Walgreens, right? This is not Tylenol, folks. This is your oxycodone kind of a thing. This is steroids. This is prescription drugs. And do we really want cannabis to be a prescription? I think that's the only place it would head would be to be taken over by these pharmaceutical industries. So really, I feel like we as an industry did this to ourselves because we've been leading with cannabis as medicine for such a long time. I remember even as a high schooler back in the day in Colorado joking with my friends about, "Oh, I smoke for my glaucoma." Because there was that rumor out there even at that time that cannabis had some medical benefits. I remember hearing about the glaucoma thing really early on, and then, of course, all of this stuff going on with, unfortunately, like, the AIDS patients at the time, right? I'm an '80s baby, '90s. There were a lot of folks pioneering this cannabis, this medical cannabis, right, that happened in California, and so now that the government's kinda like, "You know what? Those folks might have been onto something," and we all know in the industry that the government's had the patent on CBD. for a long time, and in that patent states that it has medical benefits. I think that we did it to ourselves in a way, unfortunately, because now folks are big pharma listened and they're like, you know what? You're making enough revenue out there, cannabis folks. We're just going to reschedule that right into our laps. So I hope it doesn't happen. I hope that we eventually look at cannabis because it does have some psychoreactive properties to it, that we do treat it like we would alcohol. But then also, to be devil's advocate there, coffee has some of those properties in it, right? So do we treat caffeine? Should you be 21 or over and only in certain places can you get coffee? I don't know where we draw that line, but I don't think it should be drawn at prescription.
I couldn't agree with you more. That double-edged sword you're talking about, we've seen it happen where with every state that it goes medicinal first. It never goes recreational or medicinal together. It's always medicinal, as you said, like that Trojan horse to the part of my language, lube up the public to get it into an adult use, and that's where we've seen it. But now with the rescheduling, there is that quandary of it becoming something where the big pharma packages it up, have a Kim Kardashian commercial of it, and all of a sudden they're making millions of dollars and it's being run through the United Health of the world or the PBMs, which is pharmaceutical benefits management. For those of you who don't know, I used to work for CBS Health, so not sure they love that, but hey, it's on camera now. But yeah, I really love your perspective on that. Now, I guess my next question is, we're wrapping up here pretty soon. Where do you see the new, because you're in Nevada, it's a little bit more of a mature market, but you still have your foot in New York. I'd love to hear where you see without reschedulization, say without reschedulization on the table, where do you see those markets going? And with the BioTrack integration, with the state system now being paused, there's a lot of fear that the small businesses are going to be run out because there's not a way to track if there's inversion happening. So I'd love for you to give your opinion on that if possible.
Yeah, no, I think that's a huge red flag for New York is how well, and when you say MSO, we call them ROs in New York, regional operators. And these are, but they're, again, they're in multiple states and they're vertically integrated, meaning they have the dispensary plus the cultivation, production, sometimes distribution, etc. license. And it's been kind of a guise because New York, on the sort of government or official statement side, it's like we're so full of equity in this state and we've given everyone an equal opportunity to be successful. And the reality is, yeah, there's very different playing spaces. The fact that, yes, they gave the 300 cannabis hemp farmers that had licensed grows in New York the first opportunity to become recreational cannabis growers, right? Which sounds amazing. But then they told them they could only grow on 1 acre of outdoor legally. So per license, which is not a lot. No one can be successful with that and no one can have a big brand. That's why we've seen a lot of the inversion that's going on in this state. The fact that they haven't had any sort of a seed to sale tracking system. We're about to be 2026 here and it's barely getting implemented. It's allowed for a lot of corruption in New York, and New Yorkers, we're a strong independent type. And if we see a way, we're going to go through it. And that's exactly what's happened. People have just bulldogged their way in and it's a real mess, honestly. We'll see what New York looks like. I do think it will be a few years before really any of this is worked out. And then, not to mention what they just did to all the dispensaries that now have to move because they're too close to et cetera
Proximity
schools. Yeah.
schools or
Yep.
churches. Now instead of being at the front door, it's I hear it's like it's based on the actual like location, so courtyard or parking lot. So yeah, it's proverbial, as we call it, a soup sandwich in the military back in the day. And then also when it comes to Nevada, you're doing some great things there. You have the state of the art cultivation facility. Obviously, this is a great opportunity for you. Again, congratulations. I know it's been a couple months, but I'd love to hear what you have planned or where you see True Harmony going in the next couple of years here with you as charge of marketing and sales?
I see the sky is the limit for True Harmony. Really, right now in the state, we're focused on being a quality supplier for other brands. So we're focused in that wholesale arena because we've brought big agricultural practices into what we're doing. We're able to grow a massive amount of quantity, right? A big yield in a 250,000 square foot facility with all that lighting and sunlight. And so we want to be able to provide that quality level of wholesale material to other brands in the state so that they can be successful. And that's really where I see us. Perhaps sooner than later, we'll look into also developing some in house brands, but that's down the road. Right now, we're all about just being quality supply partners.
Excellent. I always love to end the podcast on a question, which is, when did you fall in love with cannabis? Every person I've had has had a different story. Knew me from Zizzle. He watched his high school friend have epilepsy, stole weed from the father and started smoking and realized that, hey, I'm not getting the seizures anymore. So it could be medicinal. It could be just enjoy the experience. But when did you decide to fall in love with cannabis? And then also to lead you to this profession that obviously is a little bit more risque, a little bit less compared to pharmaceutical sales for sure, a little bit less economic, but I'll let you answer that question.
I honestly, like I said, I'm a consumer and I have a passion for alternative healthcare and finding more holistic ways of living. I try to also just have a healthy diet and exercise, things of this nature, right? And so cannabis fits into that mantra for me. And it's always really helped me. I guess I fell in love with it. I fell most deeply in love with cannabis after I joined the industry, honestly. And I said I come from pharmaceutical sales background. Never once in that industry did I ever hear from a patient that actually it was really that life changing for them, like getting on my prescription. I'd celebrate the wins of meeting my quota, right, every quarter, but not any patient satisfaction. And joining the cannabis industry and getting to go to events. I used to go to this event every month in Las Vegas called Women in Wellness. And there'd be about probably 30 women, not just women, men would show up too. And we would all go around in a circle and just share their stories of why they used cannabis. And everyone has a reason. And it's such a powerful reason from, like you said, from, oh, this saved my friend's epilepsy. I had this dog that was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and given 6 months to live. And I started giving him RSO and he lived for almost 3 years after. It's stories like that. There really is. I know we're talking about medical stuff again, which is not, but you don't hear about those stories in even the pharmaceutical industry or the medical industry, right? And so that's really what made me fall deeply more in love with cannabis.
I love that. I love that. It is medicinal and has medicinal values. And I love to hear that, to see your customer, the customers, the patients happy and realizing that it really helps. It brings a joy to me to hear that from you as well. Before I let you go, how can people get a hold of the Megan Jewett?
Oh, let's see. You can follow me on social media. That's mainstream Mary Jane. And then I'm on LinkedIn. You can contact the True Harmony info line. That will be me too.
We'll put the website up for True Harmony as well on our podcast here. But it was a pleasure speaking with you, Megan. Like, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk to me and share your stories around the cannabis space.
No, thank you so much for having me, man. It was a pleasure to talk to you too. And I wish you the best of luck. I hope you're having a great week.
I am. Now that I talked to you, it's even a better one. But for all my audience out there, my name is Vien. I'm the director of marketing for Flourish Software. Thank you for attending the podcast today, Flourishing Cannabis. Stay happy, healthy, and high responsibly.
Namaste.